Welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. This is the place where we take a no bullshit look at life's little lessons. Here, together, we find the spiritual glory in even the most wicked hard story. This is a journey from fear back to love and how we can find our greatest strength and happiness in some of the most unlikely places. I believe that if you're willing to change your mind, you can totally change your life. So, are you ready to rewrite your story and choose to live free? Let's do this. Hey, you guys, I am so excited to finally release this episode to you. I had this episode recorded several months ago with my amazing guest, Linda Tai. And if I could have like a wicked long title for this episode, it would be probably How Our Bodies Hold the Stories of Our Lives with somatic trauma therapist, Linda Tai. But I can't make it that long. So it's probably going to be something like How Our Bodies Hold Our Stories. And I got to know Linda because I studied with her over the course of several months and took a couple of certification classes with her. One is on somatic embodiment and regulation strategies. And then another one was on polyvagal inspired meditation. And really, here's the deal. You're going to get to know Linda just through, listening to this episode. But I'll read a little bit of her bio just to give you some context. But so in short, she's a somatic therapist. She's a trauma therapist. She's a mental health clinician. She is a storyteller and an educator and a community builder. And she's had her own lived experiences of individual and collective and historical and cultural trauma and also healing. And she uses her background in trauma therapy and in somatic therapies and in yoga to guide others through the steps that help people to recognize and safely release tension through resourcing their body. And she really believes in empowering others through education and skills to ignite potential and fueling of your own innate desire to learn and to grow and to heal. And she has assisted internationally renowned psychiatrist and trauma expert, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who is the author of The Body Keeps the Score. She is an adjunct faculty member in the social work department at the University of Alaska. She specializes in trauma-informed care and compassion, fatigue, resilience skills. She has a Master of Social Work with an emphasis on the neurobiology of attachment and trauma. She trains all kinds of clinicians in all different kinds of departments, including psychology, nursing, and medicine at the Fairbanks Memorial Hospital in Alaska. She has, expertise in the fields of meditation and yoga and self-inquiry, in addictions and behavioral health, childhood adversity and resiliency, colonization, intergenerational refugee trauma, and social justice. You guys, she's just something else. That's all I can say. Not only that, she's so lovely, and you're going to love her accent. And I think you're just going to love her vibe and her energy. There's just so much I could tell you about my experience of her, but mostly I just want you to go ahead and enjoy this episode with her, which again, like I said, I think I'm just going to call it How Our Bodies Hold Our Stories. And I told her that I was going to release this episode in the month of May, because May is a really big month for me and often for the members of my family, because it's kind of like the month, I kind of consider it like the month of my mother. May 7th was the anniversary this year. 2021 is the 40th anniversary of my mother's murder. So that's on May 7th. And then like May 9th is Mother's Day. And then May 14th is my mother's birthday, and on, right? So May is kind of like a month where a lot of my childhood trauma really kind of came to a head, like that big headline story of when my mother was killed. And so I thought it was just like one of the perfect times to share this episode and to share her genius and her brilliance. Also kind of like as a nod to my mother. So thank you so much for listening. I think this topic of trauma, healing trauma, how it shows up in the nervous system, how it shows up in the body, and the things that we can do to try and help ourselves and come to understand each other a little bit better. I just think it's fascinating and wicked important work. And I appreciate you listening and being here today. So enjoy. Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. You just don't even know. If you listen to my intro, you already know I'm wicked excited, but you have no idea. First of all, I'm doubly excited because not only is Linda Ty here with us today, but so is Buttons. If you're watching this right now, you can see, oh my God, we were just laughing. I love it. Linda has a furry kid named Billy Buttons, a dog, and I have a bunny, Binky Buttons. And so we both have buttons in our lives, which is so fantastic. So Linda, I am just so thrilled to have you here. So I just want to give you a chance to say hello. And then I just want to say a couple more things about you before we dive into a conversation. So, hi.
Hi, it is such an absolute pleasure to be here with you all today. And I have Miss Billy Buttons here with me today. She is my cuddle bug. And we all need to have cuddle bugs in our lives.
Yeah, it's so important to have cuddle bugs in our lives. And so one of the things that I was thinking about, your bio is just so impressive, and it's so varied and vast, and you're obviously, and I know, let me just say this, and I know this because I just spent 10 weeks with you taking these two different workshops and trainings that you do, which I want to, talk about in a little bit. So I really got to see your style. It's one thing to have all the trainings and all the things after your names and whatever, but how you just show up in the room with other human beings is so important. And it was just so powerful. And I want to talk about this too. It was so powerful, just kind of like how you showed up, the space that you held for people. It was just really, really, really beautiful to behold. And so can we just start with, I always think like this. So we hear somebody's bio, we hear how like amazing they are, but I'm always curious about the little kid that became this human being. And this is kind of a 3-part question, but stick with me. So I would love to hear a little bit more about like your origin story, what you were like as a little kid, and maybe how this origin story has informed or influenced or inspired the work that you do today.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, wow. What a rich question, Karen. I just love it so much. So it's neat that you use the phrase origin story, because so much of my childhood and adolescence and adulthood has been in search of my origin story.
Yes.
So I was born in Vietnam. My family are boat people. So we were refugees. We sought refuge. We made it to a refugee camp in Malaysia, or off the coast of Malaysia, Pulau Bidong. And from there, we were sponsored out to Australia under a pilot rural resettlement scheme. And there is so much that goes with having traumatized parents. Yeah.
Yes.
And so, and then there's also the issues of enculturation and acculturation and traumatic homesickness, where my mother in particular was so traumatized as a result of the way in which we left Vietnam, as well as the conditions of Vietnam, that she wasn't able to talk to us about who she was or where she'd come from or the stories of her people or the songs of her ancestors. And so whenever I asked her about Vietnam, or whenever I asked her about where I was born or where she was from, she would just get collapsed and dissociated. And so I learned that in that space, that there was a shame. Like, it's not okay to ask about who we are or where we've come from, and there's something fundamentally wrong with us, because as kids, that's what we do. We make up stories in that narrative silence. And yet, juxtaposed against that, I would also get the auto-hypnoid storytelling from both my mother and my father. And what that is when they tell their trauma story, right, over and over, but it's the same, same sections of the same trauma story. And in a way, I got vicariously traumatized by that and got numbed out from the depth and the nuance of that story, because I only got to hear the same snippets over and over again. And yet it was the ways in which they were trying to connect to us and impart something to us and share something that we could inhabit and pass on. And so for me in my childhood, there was this sense of not quite knowing where my place was. And for me as a child, I felt like I was wrapped in cotton wool, like a 6-foot wall of cotton wool where nothing could get in, but yet I couldn't actually reach out. And when I reached out, it wasn't effective. It didn't land, you know, when people reached back, or I didn't feel that people ever saw me because there was this big fat layer of cotton wool. And it was only as an adult, like well into my adult years, when I read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, that I then realized, oh, wow, that book.
Yeah.
Right. I went, oh my God, I'm a trauma survivor. Right, like, hello. But the thing was that people had mentioned to me, you know, healing and self-work prior to that. And I'd look at them like, what? I don't understand. Like, you know, what are you talking about? Because I haven't been raped. I haven't experienced like interpersonal traumatization. And my idea of trauma was limited to that interpersonal boundary violation. And so when, after I read that book, I realized, oh, there's even more to the origin story, because there's obviously trauma in there somewhere that my psyche has shuttled off to one side. Yeah. And then that allowed me to stay curious and to join the pieces for myself of my own life through my own trauma work, but also through connecting with my parents in a new way. Because I also got to see that they were trauma survivors, and that was never on my radar either.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's such a big thing. I think so many of us, like in the work that I do, you know, I've been a yoga teacher for over 20 years, and Thai yoga massage, you know, I did Thai yoga massage, and I'm a spiritual mentor. And like you, like so much of what I love about your teaching is as deep, like even the subject matter, like trauma, right? Like all this stuff, but you have a lightness to you, and you bring humor to your work and incredible stories and stuff like that. So it really resonates with me, the way that you talk about all these things. But I just know, like, even people will ask me, you know, so you don't work with kids? And I said, well, I work with adults, but it's really like traumatized children in adult bodies. And one of the things that I think, when you start to do your own healing work or trauma work or therapy or whatever, just increasing your own self-awareness, you start to realize, because I think there's this thing that we do as children, even as young adults and even as adults, where we forget, like, oh yeah, my parents were people too. And they were little kids too, who had parents too, and you know, we talk about generational trauma and stuff like that, but I think we do this thing where, like, when you're talking about being wrapped in like this batten of cotton wool, like this distancing, I think we as kids sometimes do that to our parents too. Like, we forget that they have their own origin stories, and that what a way. And I think it helps us to look at them with a little more compassion, maybe a little bit more understanding.
Yes. And I really believe that there's this unhealthy notion in society about how we should forgive everyone, or we should forgive people, or we should move towards forgiveness. And that preemptive forgiveness, I believe, can be detrimental and potentially toxic for many individuals. And speaking for myself, right, there wasn't abuse in my family, there was simply neglect. And yet it was overlaid on top of early childhood trauma, and I needed to work through my own trauma so that I could grieve. And then in the space that appeared after that, I was then able to attribute more humanness to my parents.
Yes.
Yeah, the trauma ran interference with that capacity.
I 100% agree. And, you know, a lot of the work that I do, forgiveness, as you know too, right? Like in your work, forgiveness is like a huge part of it. And I think one of the missing pieces, so, I don't think you know anything about me, but one of the things is my mother was murdered when I was 12 years old. And so there was, just talking about, and my whole world changed after that. I mean, there was already trauma, like you already have like trauma. Then there was like the headline story, and then more, it was just like layer, because my home life changed. I had to go live with people I didn't really know. It was just my whole world blew apart. And so when forgiveness, like part of my forgiveness work was forgiving the man that murdered my mother. And one of the things I realized not that long ago is that I was able to forgive him because I let myself feel every fucking, like every thought, like the rage and the anger and the names that I called him and the thoughts that I allowed myself to think about him. Like the forgiveness, it looks so shiny and beautiful, right? But it wasn't possible until I let myself feel all that other shit. And I'm a big fan of forgiveness, but I think if you like skip those other steps, it's like you said, it's like that forced or preemptive, or I should, like, especially in the spiritual community, right? A lot of spiritual bypassing happens. Like I should do this. But for me, there is no freedom and release from just the weight of that thing until I let myself be wicked honest about
Yeah.
how I felt.
And that spiritual bypass, that's bypassing the grief process. Yeah. So forgiveness is an outcome, it's a result, it's not the goal. Right. And so
Yes.
when it comes to
Yes.
grief work, anger and rage is one of the stages of grief that we move through. And what anger and rage is it's actually claiming that something has shaken me to the very fucking core of me.
Yes.
And I need you to know that.
Yes.
And I need you to witness that. And that's that spiritual bypass. We need to move through that ownership of that which was taken that shouldn't have been taken, as well as that which was given that shouldn't have been given, as well as that which wasn't given that should have been given. Yeah.
I'm just letting that one land for the people. Like I just got emotional again. Like I'm letting that land for people. I want to touch on this because as I was going through the 2 10-week courses, so with you, so one was the certificate in somatic embodiment and regulation strategies, which was amazing. And at times, like a little over my head as not being a therapist. So I found myself Googling and using like a lot, like looking up certain, like all the therapists were like nodding their head, like, yes, Linda. And a couple of us lay people were like, what? Like, right. But it was amazing because I learned so much. And the other thing other class I took with you was a 10-week course in polyvagal inspired meditation, which you guys, it's really, it was just like a great resource and experience to help people whose maybe their nervous systems don't allow them to sit still for meditation. So we can talk about that in a little bit. But as I was learning through these 10 weeks, I would often take certain things that you said and share it with my membership and my people who are I have one-to-one clients, and then I also have a membership called The Nest. And so I would take something that you said on one of the trainings, which you just kind of said in a slightly different way here, was trauma isn't just what happened to us. It's what didn't happen that should have happened. So can we dive into that a little bit? Because I know that when I said it, like, because I do Zoom calls, when like a dog hears something and they like tilt their head, I saw like a bunch of people in the room go, huh? Right? Like, and they were like, what does that mean? But it caught them. So can we dive in a little bit?
Sure. So trauma isn't just what happened that shouldn't have happened. It's also what didn't happen that should have happened. So it's a failure to protect. It's the failure to take delight in someone else. It's the failure of, it's the positive imprints that weren't made that then impact us developmentally, because then we go through life not getting what we didn't get. And because we don't get what we didn't get, we are out in the world and people are relating to us with joy, with delight, with offering, and we're shut down from that because we never got it back then.
Yes.
And so it either lands as a blank or it lands as a fence. Like, what do you think? There's something wrong with me that I need you to like be nice to me? Yeah, and so when it comes to trauma treatment, we can use our trauma treatment techniques to get rid of the negative impact of trauma. And yet then there's this void, there's this big blank in the landscape that then needs to be filled with positive experiences. And this is the part of therapy that is still new for trauma therapists, because we've got all these modalities now that we're working with to remove the negative imprint of the trauma. So it's no longer the thing that's running interference with all our systems of engagement with the world. And yet there can be this existential void that then happens once that trauma's gone. Yeah, once it's no longer impacting upon our psyche. And so that's then where we need to have that support in someone else taking joy in us, taking delight in us, letting other people do things for us, allowing for care to actually seep in, that other people will protect me, other people will stand up for me. And in that space, there's grief.
Yes.
It's the grief of, oh my God, my parents weren't there to protect me and I didn't see that.
Well, yes, yes, and here's and this is a, and you can totally correct me or whatever, and or say interesting or whatever you're gonna say about this, but when you say that, when you're like, oh, I didn't realize that they weren't there for me. Part of my personal experience has been, um, somebody wasn't there for me, but how do I say this? I couldn't accept that. It's almost like I had to protect them and protect myself from the truth because it was too painful to accept that they weren't there for me. Not just that I wasn't aware of it. I think somewhere deep inside I was aware of it. And it was just like, oh, I can't handle that truth. I always say I didn't want the truthy truth. I couldn't handle that.
Yes. And we continue that schema or that map of ourselves and the world as we continue into adulthood. And yet, part of what happens is there's a part of us that doesn't want to accept that that ship has sailed.
Yes.
Right? And there's nothing we can actually do to ever make that happen or ever make that come back. And especially when it comes to these abandonment wounds,
Oof.
not only has that ship sailed, there's also then that recognition that, oh my God, I've been setting up everyone in my life to be a surrogate mother or father or caretaker for me.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I never had the container or the space where I could rage and then grieve my losses.
Yes. And it's so interesting, I think, as adults, where people sometimes feel like I've heard people say to me, I don't have time to feel my feelings. I don't have time to have a breakdown. I feel like if I feel my feelings, if I let myself feel this delayed grief, they're like, KK, I don't have time to have a breakdown right now. And I'm like, but you can't, like, we can't keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to tap into a little bit more deeply, because you're considered a somatic. I mean, you're a lot of things, right? Like, here's I want to just read this, you guys, because I thought this is all the things: somatic therapist and trauma therapist, freelance educator, public speaker and storyteller, group facilitator, collaborator. I love this. Infiltrator, cross pollinator. I love this. Community builder, agent of change, and happy human being. And these are so powerful. The happy human being, though, is because you've done a lot of work on this. And in your work as a somatic therapist and as a trauma therapist, can you just like define a little bit for somebody who might be listening and who can, what's the word I'm looking for? This resonates with them, but they're like, what is somatic therapy? Like, Linda, like, what does that really mean? And I've heard you say it in one way before, but I just want to see what just kind of organically comes out of your mouth right now.
Oh. Somatic therapy is actually a huge field.
Yes.
It's about learning that the body, the nervous system, holds implicit or procedural or subconscious memories that we may not be aware of, and that by working with and through the body, we can access a deeper truth that isn't possible when we go through cognitive awareness. Yes, because there's a narrative that we tell ourselves and that we've told ourselves and that we hang on to. And yet, if we pause for long enough and sink into the body, there's something else that's wanting to emerge. And beyond that, when we look at the nervous system, I always find that there's a sense of depathologizing that happens when we can begin to befriend and get to know our nervous system, because that allows for a spaciousness of, I've been stuck in survival all this time and not realizing it. And my state of survival, whether it's fight, flight, freeze, that can also express as go get them, keep going no matter what. And that's a survival strategy. And we may still be living in survival and not realizing it. And so when we can hold that space and pause with curiosity, we can then deconstruct whether that serves us and what we can do about that.
Oh, yes, you guys, you know why I love Linda. If you're listening, you can hear the sound of her voice. Never mind my voice. I always say, if you can hear the sound of my voice right now, if you can hear the sound of Linda's voice right now, even just listening to the way you talk is like, my nervous system just goes, oh, we love Linda. Because I want to talk about that, right? Like in a second, the cues of safety, because there's something in your voice that it feels safe to me, which is fascinating to me. But one of the things you said on an interview you did one time about somatic therapy, you said somatic therapy, and you were talking about this, it's the way in which our body holds the stories of our life. And as a storyteller too, this really resonated with me. And I was like double amen hands, I call it. I was like, Linda, yes. And you talk a lot too about how our state creates our stories. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Oh, sure. So we have three main nervous system states. Yeah. There's ventral, which is safety in stillness and safety in action, in connection. So that's safety in connection, whether we're in action or we're more restful. Yeah. But there's this sense of embodiment, and it's okay for me to be here in this world. My thoughts and my feelings aren't overwhelming, and I can hold space for the both of them simultaneously. I can perspective take other people's thoughts and feelings and juxtapose them against mine, and it's not overwhelming, right? It's just simply this space of togetherness and being on the same page and mutuality that allows me to then move towards disagreement or confrontation or conflict in such a way that I experience it as creative tension. Right, so that's ventral. Yeah, it's
that's not, I go, oh yes. Thank you.
And then what happens when we perceive more cues of unsafety than cues of safety is that the nervous system begins to ramp up. We start to move a bit fast, the head comes forward, perhaps my eyes start to look around to look for the safe person or to look for the exit or to look for the answer. I get into my head. Things start to pace up a little bit because now the adrenaline and the cortisol is starting to move through my nervous system. There's some energy in the shoulders. My hands start to get fidgety because I'm starting to get into that fidget as a precursor to fight. Perhaps my lower body starts to mobilize. I start to have the whole body fidgets. Yeah, I can't sit still. And really it's because I'm wanting to get myself out of here or I'm wanting to stand my ground. And then we start to get into the vehement emotions. And when I'm in full-blown sympathetic, there is no prefrontal cortex happening. Right? Time stands still. Everything is about me and everything is about survival.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I am becoming overwhelmed by feelings of panic, rage, terror.
Yes.
And I can get stuck in that frozen terror of hyperarousal. Yeah. I'm stuck between my needs and my fears. I'm stuck between my needs and your fears. Or I'm stuck between my fears and your needs, and I'm incapacitated in that moment, and yet there's so much up energy. And so for some of us, we go to that as a functional strategy of this brace freeze
Mm-hmm.
so that we can assess what's going to happen next. And yet at some point in our past, that was how we survived, was to just go into this freeze. And we can't sustain that for very long before we go into we go into total overwhelm and collapse. Right. And this is the dorsal vagal branch of the nervous system. This is fuck this shit. It is all too much. Why do I even bother? This is helpless and hopeless and despairing. The world is against me. I don't know why I even bother. Someone just make the world stop. Actually, I'll just get off. I'll just get off this train and I'll just hide under my desk. And, you know, actually, it might be easier to live this way. Perpetually pessimistic and despairing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And no one wants to be my friend anyway. So it's
Oh.
totally okay, because this isolation, this conservation of resources in order to survive is that it's that limp home mode.
Yes.
In your car, you know, with your car, how when you get like not much gas left in the tank, you can't put your foot on the gas pedal because the car is in limp home mode. That is dorsal vagus, right? I am just limp home. But that isolation,
Yes.
so that we can actually like let go totally, right? So that we can actually reset the nervous system. And yet we live in a society that says it's not okay to live in dorsal.
Yeah.
And so we end up cutting, yeah, because that adrenaline and that cortisol allows us to then get back up off the floor. We use uppers. We beat ourselves up with the harsh inner critic so that we can keep going. Yeah, so it's not just these survival strategies that have kicked in at some point previously in our lives. It's also then the adaptive strategies that we've used in the face of,
Yes.
right, these overwhelming strategies that then are part of the gift that we get to work with and through.
Yeah, right. I love the reframe there. And that's what I always say too, though. I talk about the work that I do in this process called Your Story to Your Glory. And
Mm-hmm.
I just think like we have so much to work with, right? Like the gifts of our childhoods and our past. And I just want to break in here a little bit and say, like, one of the things that I took away from being with you over the past 10 weeks, and it made so much sense to me. So I'm going to say two things. Number one, not only am I looking at people through that lens of their humanity and always through this lens of their divinity, but now when I'm just simply with people, I'm kind of seeing them through this third lens now of just like being a nervous system. And it takes away like so much of like taking things personally, or but it also is giving me so much more deeper insight in something you said. Like I remember just taking so many notes, and I just scribbled this thing when you said it one time, and maybe you didn't say it quite this way, but this is how I heard it, interpreted it, and received it. Was I was like, I was adapting as a little kid my own nervous system to all the nervous systems around me. And there was really kind of no fucking room for what I wanted. Didn't matter what I wanted. I was just trying to survive. And so now I just feel like one of the gifts of being in my 50s now is like and not having like, I am kind of the main influence in a lot of ways. It's like, oh, I actually get to choose how I want to feel, who I want to be around, what situations I want to be in that help me to regulate and resource myself. So, because I'm not at the mercy of being around, you know, when you're a little kid, you're at the mercy of the people, the choices, the resources, and the nervous systems around you.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, our nervous systems as babies, as toddlers, as children, our nervous systems become shaped by the nervous systems that we're around. So if you're around a whole bunch of nervous systems that are like this, well, your nervous system better be able to function like this, because otherwise you're not going to fit in.
For
Right?
those of you who are listening, I'm gonna verbalize what I'm seeing right now. So Linda's just kind of like rocking her shoulders, smile on her face, kind of like grooving, like moving her head from side to side, like upbeat energy. That's what she's showing right now. Yes, please continue.
And then if you're around nervous systems where they're a bit pessimistic, they put you down, they're not quite on your page, they want you to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Life is tough, girly, come on. You know, quit your crying, I'll give you something to cry about.
Yes.
Or what's going to happen to your nervous system?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what happened to my nervous system. Irritable bowel syndrome. You know what I'm saying? Like hardcore, like just the body was just like constantly in terror. Like you, similarly, it was so fascinating talking to a woman who is a therapist and a hypnotherapist one time. And after listening to me just kind of like da 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 da, because I think one of the gifts, I think in some ways, of being able to dissociate, and like, and in yoga we sometimes call it like this witness consciousness, to be able to step back, was I could just kind of report the things that had happened in my life, right? I'm sure you, on some level, you can relate to this. And at one point she just stopped me and she said, you were highly traumatized. And I was like, what? It was like total news to me. And I remember going downstairs to tell my sweetie, my husband, Chris, and I was like, sweetie, he's like, yeah. I was like, did you know that I was traumatized? And he looked at me like, no shit, Sherlock. But it was just news to me, because I think I did grow up in that environment of, I grew up in a very like 30 miles north of Boston, immigrant city, like blue collar workers, fucking suck it up and stuff it down. I'll give you something to like that whole thing. Like we didn't talk about my mother after she died. We didn't like, it was like gone overnight, fucking deal with it, that type of a thing. And just like terror. And I grew up, like you're talking, like my nervous system was always just like just terror. Yes. And so scared out of my mind, but with a hardcore tough act. Right?
Yeah. So that's the survival strategy. That's the adaptive survival strategy that we got to inherit from our ancestors, that keep going. You know, you just stuff it down and you keep going.
Yes.
Yeah. And so as children, we become, we just get told these messages and we figure that that is what life is. And yet, how do we juxtapose that against the natural childlike tendencies and needs, right? Your emotional dependency needs. And so what we do is we compartmentalize off. We say, okay, well, I don't have needs. What are you talking about? Yeah, we deny our own needs, we minimize them, we stuff them down, we minimize other people's feelings and other people's needs, whether they're physical or emotional, and we start to victim blame ourselves and other people. And then next adaptive strategy, control.
I'm just checking all these boxes as you're talking, Linda. You just keep going. I'm just checking. I'm just keeping score over here. Go ahead.
So control, perfectionism, all or nothing thinking, a harsh inner critic, verticalized relationships. Where am I on the pecking order? Because I'm more comfortable with that and putting you above me on a pedestal or surrounding myself with people who are below me than what it is to actually engage in relationships with other people as equals.
Yeah, like I'm always just like, every time I learn, like I'm listening to you and I'm learning, I'm always just like, it's just like peeling back another, it's like, let's just peek behind this curtain right now, right? And I think what you're saying, I know there are people right now who are listening like, holy shit, like, yes. And these survival strategies, you know, and think about that. They literally in some cases kept us alive.
Yes.
And at some point though, what you're saying on some level is they stop working.
Yes. The strategies that keep us alive keep us from living.
Oh, Linda, hold on. Let's just pause for a second. And like, can you please repeat that?
The strategies that keep us alive keep us from living.
Mm. Yes.
Yeah. And what can happen usually at this nexus is people then think, well, because you're still stuck in that black and white thinking, right? So people then think, well, I'm not going to let go of my control or my perfectionism or my all or nothing thinking. That's kept me alive. Like, get away from me, lady. I don't have any other way of being in the world.
And what if, like you said earlier, right? Like, I'll never forget being at my yoga teacher training, right? In 2001 or whatever, at Kripalu, I'm having a total severe IBS. Because talk about moving from my world into living at Kripalu for a month, where it is just like the energy, everything is different. The food is different. The schedule is different. They want me to sit in a fucking share circle and whoever has the stick talks. Like, I was like, what? Right? Like, I was like, what is happening? You want me to be vulnerable in front of a group of strangers? Are you kidding me? I was like, these people are crazy, right? And I'll never forget. So my IBS was just like flaring, right? And so like shitting my brains out, literally. So I have one day where I'm just like completely overwhelmed. And one of the yoga teachers comes over to me and she makes me this like little place to lay down. It's got blankets and bolsters, and she covers me with a blanket and she puts a sandbag on my tummy, and she literally just puts her hand on me and she says, now you just lay here and love yourself. Give
Did you
yourself
punch her
some
in
love.
the face?
I burst into tears and
Oh,
she's horrified and she's like, what's wrong? And I said, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do that, lady. And it was just this moment of realizing like what, like so many, even at 52, I'm continuously surprised by like who I was, who I am. And one of the things I want to say too about what we're talking about particularly is I'm actually really proud of that younger version of me for how creative she was, how strong she was, how resilient and adaptive. Like she was like, I was the kid who I was like, I am going to find a way to get through this. Right. So now, of course, I have better tools. But one of the things I wanted to say is back to you, and we're back. And we're back. Back to what you were saying. I'm not going to give up my perfectionism and my control and all these things, especially when I don't have anything to replace it with.
yes. One of my yoga teachers, Anna Forrest, said, if you can't do self-love, start with self-respect. And that landed for me at that point in my life. Right? We just got to like baby step all of it. Right. And
Yes.
so as we start to have an awareness of the strategies we'd like to let go of, we need to build a set of tools.
Yes.
Or rather toys, right, that we can play with. Yes.
Okay, for those of you again who are not watching, I just held up Priscilla, who I've had since I was 15 years old. And she is just like, oh, talking about regulating my nervous system right here. I love her so much. So I just held up my stuffed animal, my bunny, you guys. That's why she's laughing.
And I bet there's this thing that you do when you hold up Priscilla and you've got her by her arms.
Yeah.
And if you give her arms a squeeze with your hands, it feels really good because you've got something you can hold on
Sometimes
to.
well, when I sleep at night, if I don't have her here,
Yeah.
I'll lean her so her forehead's on my forehead and I hold her hand. I'm 52, you guys. I have no shame about this. I'm like, bury me. Well, I'm going to be cremated, but I'm like, take Priscilla with me because she has been animals, furry kids, animals have been we were talking about this before we started filming, such a huge like help to me and Priscilla. As silly as it sounds, and maybe we could dive into that in a minute, because I know you have like silly cow, and I see a stuffy behind you in your basket, and I just think like, oh my God. And that was one of the things too about learning from you is you, I think most I'm going to do air quotes here, but most quote unquote adults or quote unquote normal adults, whatever, would be like, why are you 52 and you still have this stuffed animal? And I'm sure that you can talk about maybe why it's so comforting or reassuring that we have these toys, as you're saying.
Yes, absolutely. And there's many layers to this, but okay, just the example there with you and Priscilla. Yeah, there's the ability to hold something and squeeze, right? And when we squeeze up and in and then we release, what we're doing is we're edging ourselves away from that freeze response. Because when we're in high freeze, there's a lot of tension in my body, and yet there's this body armor that's descended upon me and I can't move.
Yes.
Right. So when I do the hug, squeeze, release, I get to break through some of that body armoring. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And for some of us, that squeeze and release entails like pushing our stuffy into our sternum. And that heavy weight and pressure on the sternum can be so regulating for many of us. Right. Having the stuffy on our lap. Yeah. When it sits on our lap, I've noticed with my sexual assault survivors that a sandbag across the pelvis, yeah, or a stuffy on the lap or a weighted blanket across the lap can be so regulating because it creates a barrier between my pelvic region and the world.
Yes.
And yes. And then with the right size stuffy, those big ones where you can actually hold your body over them. For those of us who are prone to collapse, to have something there that we can like lean our body over, we can receive support in our collapse. Yeah.
I love that.
The converse of that, same but different, is one of my friends, her nephew has this teenage ninja mutant turtle backpack that he loves to wear, right? And it's soft and fluffy, and he's like 6 or 7, and his dad just hates it. But the thing is when this kid wears his backpack, what happens is his shoulders roll open. He's got support at his back. He's got a felt sense of someone's got my back. Yeah. And then he can run around and play with the other kids. And I also find it really curious that for you, Karen, you put your stuffy on your third eye. And when I've done the sandbags with trauma survivors, for those who overthink, 2 blocks either side of the head and sandbag across the top, and that heavy weight on the forehead. Yeah, it helps to decrease that overthinking, and it also helps to close the third eye. And this is our gift, right? Hypervigilance, hypersensitivity. We're always on the lookout for danger, right? And then it prevents us from being able to go to sleep and have restful sleep. And so if it's not a stuffy on the third eye, I wear those headbands that you use to hold your hair back, but I do it as like a tennis player sweatband. While I'm sleeping, because it keeps it lets my third eye sleep.
Oh my God, Linda, like exactly. I know in Thai yoga massage, there's when we're doing work with somebody who's laying on their back, we call it laying the brick, where we would place a sandbag right over the belly. And Cam Tai Chow, who was my teacher, one of my teachers, he said that this is also really good for hyperactive children. And it allows them to focus on their breath and to bring their breath into the belly, and it slows down and regulates. And one of the things that I'll say I love so much about being in your 10-week programs was that not only just so many amazing resources and tools to put in my toolkit. In my work, I call it the spiritual toolkit. And I just feel like from learning from you, and I hope to continue to be able to do one of your small groups soon, that I'm going to continue to learn from you. But what I loved is how much I can just tell you, for those of you who are listening, because one of the other beautiful things that you do to kind of push back against kind of the systems that are kept in place to keep people from their own self-healing tools is you make your trainings really affordable, and you have scholarships and stuff like that. So your teaching of the first class that I did was like a lot of people were in that. So I am also so curious. So while you're teaching, I'm of course paying attention to you, but I would often be looking at the reactions of people in all the little squares, because I'm fascinated how it's landing for different people. And one of the things that I saw is you normalized so many of the things that we thought, that we felt, that we experienced. Like I saw so many people like nodding their head yes, and I would see the chat box just like light up, because it was like somebody who finally fucking gets us and who can help us to understand ourselves. And when you start to understand that these things that you've been doing that sometimes you didn't even know you were doing, but of course I guess what it is we felt seen and heard, and we could recognize what was going on. And that is so not just comforting and healing, but it's empowering.
Yes, because what we do, right, as trauma survivors is this perpetual wound of being misunderstood. And so what we do is we go through life trying to find the one special individual other who'll get us. And then we get a therapist and we try to make them get us. And really, it's about you getting you. And
Linda. Amen and hallelujah to that.
Yeah. And yet we get stuck in that cycle because that wounding is so strong. We're looking for someone else to try and like help us solve our problem of being misunderstood. But really, can I pause for long enough and understand me? And I believe that's where psychoeducation is so helpful. So helpful. And we live in this society that makes mental health care so inaccessible for certain people, right? And so that's part of why I make the classes so affordable, is so that individuals who are invested in their own healing journey are able to take these classes and to be able to then apply it to their lives in the ways that they feel most appropriate for them. Yeah. I've had extensive periods of my own life not being able to access mental health care.
Me too.
Yeah.
I mean, thank God. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but at 52, I say like I moved from Boston to LA right at the time, like 91, right at the boom of the self-help movement, right? So Marianne Williamson, Tony Robbins, Oprah, Louise Hay, my friend David Kessler, like all these amazing, brilliant teachers. Thank Christ for libraries. I will just say this, library cards are even the playing field for poor kids.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So thank God for that. And also bookstores, like books were my mentors until I could quote unquote afford or whatever to have real life people that I could either pay or who just divinely guided. I crossed paths with powerful teachers who took me under their wing or whatever. Books were my but now we have live trainings, but books saved me, Linda, in such huge ways.
Yes. And that is so common, I've noticed, amongst children who are raised in dysfunctional homes, or rather children who are raised in homes where there was intergenerational circumstances that caused for parents in service of survival to disconnect from their own ability to, be there for themselves and their children in the ways that are developmentally optimal. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I know if you had more. So because I could talk to you all day long. I'll never forget the first time I read a book by this woman. I want to say it was Melody Beattie. I'm not sure if it was Melody, but it was a book called Women Who Love Too Much. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember reading that. I was a junior in college at Boston University. And I'm reading this book and I cannot stop crying because I just recognized myself on the page and was like, holy shit, I do these things. And then realizing why I did these things. And that was one of those moments where it was just like a spotlight was just like shown. And I got angry. See, I was still in that phase. Like I got angry at myself for being weak, right? Quote unquote, weak. I got angry at myself for like, like just feeling needy. I'm doing all air quotes, you guys, right? Like, who was I to have need? Like, it was just this fascinating thing. And so it was just like so powerful to I want to circle back to that. Like one of the things as a spiritual mentor that part of my work is like, I have no interest in creating like codependent relationships. I
Mm-hmm.
love empowering people to have tools that are practical that they can use in their everyday life, which I think is what your work is all about too. And that you're so interested in helping people to have these resources, like even the resource page on your website, like all those books. I was just like, yes, Linda, like I got so excited. It's like you're so interested in helping others to be part of their own process of healing and not just looking outside of themselves. I mean, sometimes we all need help,
Mm-hmm.
but I think you've talked about it like being able to resource yourself.
Yes. Yes. To, for me as an educator, what I love more than anything is to inspire and ignite that innate learner, the nerd, the geek, I want to learn, I want to find out more. I feel so excited. Yeah.
Curiosity, yes, like yes.
Yes. And that is eventually inspired emotion. Right? We can only access curiosity and passion and joy and desire to grow and learn when we are in ventral vagus. Yeah. And so that in and of itself, the more time, the increasing micro moments that we can spend in this place of empowered curiosity bolsters our nervous system. And so then we want to find out more. Yeah, we then get inspired to learn. And you know how little children learn is they throw themselves into something. And then when they're done, they do something else. The education system has gotten in the way of our innate desire to learn and grow. When we do we do 5 classes or 10 classes all on top of each other, and we don't get to do that thing where we want to dive in and find out, right, more because it excites us. And so for me, that is the joy that I wish to impart to people, because there are so many resources out there. Follow that thread. There's that magic golden thread that you can follow.
I just love to, I feel like, so here's one thing that just popped out when you were talking. When you say ventral vagal, I know that there are some people who are like, I have no idea what that is. Is there any way we can kind of talk maybe just a super fast, like the vagus nerve and like what you kind of mean by that?
Sure. So the vagus nerve, okay, let's see here. So as human mammals, part of the mammalian architecture, and this is the newest branch of the nervous system, is that we seek connection in order to survive. Yeah. And so we are hardwired neurobiologically to turn towards others, to be a part of a group. And yet when there's childhood trauma, it impacts that, right? And that's why it can feel so disjolting and depressing and despairing to feel like we don't belong. And yet we then create more ego around that, right? That terminal uniqueness.
I call it the ego loves to make you special in one of two ways, which is either you are better than everybody else or you're such a piece of shit that like nobody would want to be around you, right?
Yes, the one up, one down. Yes. And ventral is this is this felt sense in the nervous system of safety, of the world. The world is a good place, right? I have a place here in this world, and there are people that I can turn to, and there are people who can turn to me. I am resourced and I'm resourceful. I'm able to soften into this moment, and I'm able to soften towards others, and others can soften toward me. Yeah. Yeah. It's a place where interdependence can happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yes. And something that just like kind of pinged in the back of my head that would love for you to touch upon is I have a beautiful friend who's very gifted healer, and she talk about a story, like her story is just like unbelievable. And it was through her own journey of trying to heal her own body, where she that now allows her to do the work that she does. Her name is Marianne C. She lives in Portugal now. She's an American though. She lives there, and her husband is a retired somatic therapist. And Marianne has this gift of being able to, quote unquote, just go into another person's body and report back the information she's receiving or what she's feeling in their tissues. And we always joke, right? You got issues in your tissues, kid, you know? So one of the things she said to me, so two things, and I would love for you to touch upon it. She said to me one time, information isn't what heals. Information doesn't heal. Intimacy heals. And that really landed for me as a kid, as a person who loves to go up into the intellect. Like I can really just kind of go like, boop. Hence why like putting things right here is good for me, right? I can out talk my grief and my pain. Like I can go right up into reasoning. I'm a master at it. So she kept inviting me to go into my body, come back into my body, come back into my body. And it's a fascinating thing that she does. But one of her other gifts is she talks about how even when you're in utero, a baby can feel a disconnect from their moms. And so this thing that you're talking about, this not belonging, not fitting in, not feeling, not the ability to connect or attach, sometimes start before we're even physically out in the world.
Yes. Yes, it's environmental, right? So if there's drug use, if there's domestic violence, if the mother is living through war or through an unsafe environment, that impacts the mother's stress hormones, which then impacts, right, the embryo and the fetus. And we know from the research that the last trimester of pregnancy is when the amygdala, the limbic brain, is forming. And the amygdala is the alarm center for the brain. And so women who are exposed to domestic violence in the third trimester of pregnancy have children who are more likely to experience sensory processing integration issues, generalized anxiety disorder, right? The symptoms of my nervous system is more sensitive and more on high alert. And it's a sense, and even when there's parent-child bonding there that's safe and secure, there's still this sense of, is the world okay?
It makes so much sense, Linda. And I don't think enough, and maybe in your circle, right? In your kind of your profession, right? This stuff gets talked about a lot, but I don't think your average everyday person just cruising around trying to pay their bills, and because not everybody has the time or the luxury or the privilege to be doing this kind of healing work, or to, how would they even fucking know? Like if I thank God, like and all children, I think most children, you know, people have often told me, you know, when I was a little kid, like my mantra was, why mom, like why mom, like why mom, like I always needed to know why to feel safe. I think that's what I was probably trying to do. Like I was always trying to understand. I was wicked curious, still curious, like over curious probably to this day. But I think that, you know, I don't know where I was going with that, but I think that it's not only that, I think also I imagine that if there's a traumatic birth where maybe there's like the baby is, and I think that's what happened with me. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was a wicked sensitive kid, like hyper aware of other people's. I always say, like, I was always reading like the landscape of my stepfather's forehead to see like what was like we talk about these cues of safety. I was always scanning my environment, and I was like hypersensitive. But I think part of it was, my mother, when she gave birth to me, was losing a lot of blood. I don't think there was any cozy baby on the chest thing. I think I got ripped away and didn't see her. And so I think that in the womb, whatever happens in the delivery room, and then those first formative years, like when you showed that video in your training about I think it was like it was a little boy interacting with his mom. And it was how consistent was the mom and how she responded to his, right, reaching his arms out or wanting comfort. And something that you said was, I can just let you say, but was something that you said that just like my heart just like, oh, I got a squishy, like was, if there's not a consistent thing where the parent responds with either attention or love or compassion, they'll just stop reaching out for it.
Yes. That's his survival strategy. Right. So when I have clients who come to the office who like they've finally reached out for help, and I see the way they hold their bodies, and their body is telling the story of their life, right? Which is that the arms are flaccid and hanging by the side, right? They've never learned that it's safe to reach out. And so this is their survival strategy, that they've made it through life. Their superpower, they've made it through life. Not ever needing to ask for help somehow. It's like, oh, yeah,
And I
it's
just,
a lot.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's a lot. And then back to your story, Karen, with that and to weave back to that missing piece, right? That trauma is also the things that didn't happen that should have happened.
Yes.
Right? I heard in there the little girl that was confused and needed an adult who could explain things. Yeah. And also needed an adult who could actually help you to notice and name your confusion, as well as the emotions that are underneath. The need for safety, or the need for predictability, or the need to be included. And so there's layers there of physical and emotional unpredictability or unavailability.
Yes.
And in the work that I did with Bessel van der Kolk, what I saw consistently is that when caregivers are predictable, even if they're predictably assholes, that's at least predictable. But the parents where they love you in the morning and want to stab you in the evening, right, those kids are the ones who end up incredibly unable to trust.
Oh yeah, yes. It's so interesting that you say that, because it's kind of in line with like everybody kind of comes at these topics, I think, from different. I say it's kind of like a kaleidoscope. You turn it a smidge, and there's another way to approach it, right?
Yes.
And so some people kind of talk about this like core wounds,
Mm-hmm.
right? The core essential wounds. And I was in this training one time, and they were having us kind of try to name our core wound, and they're like, lack of, like not feeling lovable. And I'm like, nope, nope, that's not me. Not feeling worthy. I was like, no, that's not me. They're like, not being able to trust. I was like, ding, 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 ding. I was like that sense of like, and I think we see that. And again, like you just see the ripple effect of, slightly OCD and like all these things. And I just think it's so amazing. And talking about your work with Bessel, which is so amazing. I think you assist in his trainings and stuff like that. And you guys, let me hold this up again, because this is an incredible book, right? The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. But I'll never forget, I'm going to hold up this picture. Like, I'll never forget reading this book. And there's this picture of this dad who is under the car that he's going to be repairing. And the daughter is standing there with a big ass wrench in her hand. And the son's just standing there, like kind of kneeling down and smiling. So I remember, when I turned the page when I first read this book and I saw that picture, I immediately thought, that girl's going to whack him with that wrench. And then my second thought is, that fucking car is going to fall on him and those kids are going to be traumatized for life, right? And then, which seems totally normal to me. And then I sat to read down the page and he says, children of trauma, look at this picture. And I was like, come on, Bessel, what are you telling me right now about myself, right? But I just think our trauma becomes so, it's not even, we don't even know we have it, Linda.
Yes, because you don't see the world as the world is. You see the world as you are.
Yes, and let's repeat that for the people in the back of the room.
Sure. You don't see the world as the world is. You see the world as you are.
Yes.
Right. So experiences become traits, becomes states, becomes personality, becomes character, becomes culture.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think this is why it's so important that we do this work.
Yes.
Because culture is what creates the systems of oppression.
Yes.
Culture is what creates the systems of homophobia and racism and all the like the thousand isms and all the ways that we other people and we're cruel to each other and we beat each other and we have war and like, because you have a bunch of people, to exactly your point, the world is how they see it, how they are. And it's like trying to connect. I find it so, I often think, I sometimes look around and I go, how the fuck are we all still here? How did we all not just murder each other or just go become hermits or like all the different ways? Because you have a bunch of people walking around with like jacked up nervous systems and totally like I guess depressed nervous systems or whatever the proper word is. It's amazing. But we see the trauma of the individuals in the culture and in the government and in the systems.
Yes. So 2 points to that. The first one is that, you know, no matter how traumatized we are, that ventral vagus, that desire to connect,
Yes.
right, is always there. Like I live in interior Alaska and there are a ton of veterans that live out in the middle of nowhere because they are done with society. They still have dogs, right? They still have that mammalian instinct to connect.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. You know, my traumatized, you know, people who use drugs in order to regulate the nervous system, right? The hardest, the biggest point of grief is letting go of those connections. Yeah.
It makes so much sense. Go ahead.
Yeah. And then to speak to that systemic piece, right? Because those isms, they're not how one person treats another person. It's the structures
Yes.
and the systems and the institutions and the laws and the positionality from which we enact laws, right? And engage in media and produce media and put ourselves out there into the world. And what happens is we then create conditions within which it is more likely that there are going to be experiences of interpersonal isms, racism, sexism, homophobism, transphobism, yeah? And so it then becomes this self-reinforcing cycle, which then keeps us all separate and afraid, unable to mobilize together and engage in action together. Yeah. So the more traumatized we become, the more separate we become.
Yes.
And what is needed is for us to actually come together and begin to be in action together so that we can shift the systems within which we live and operate.
Because if we don't, then we keep getting re-traumatized by the systems we've created.
Yes. And we inadvertently re-traumatize other people without realizing it.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So like all the things I said to you earlier about dysfunction, about kids who are raised in non-optimal families, right? The denial and minimization and all or nothing thinking, control, perfectionism, harsh inner critic. Your performance is more important than process. Your self-worth is dependent on your productivity.
Hustle
Then
culture, all of it, right?
that is, yes, it becomes cultural, right? And there are sociologists and social activists out there who have actually noted that those are actually qualities of the patriarchy and of patriarchal systems.
Yes.
Right? And so one then feeds into the other until we pause to deconstruct the ways in which we've internalized it.
And it requires, though, exactly this, what we're talking about, which is the kind of work and programs and workshops and trainings and resources that people like you offer
Yes.
to help. But it's true. Like, Linda, the only I only have one guest per month on my show. Most of my shows are solo shows. So, and I always say this, and people are always like, "Well, thanks." I'm not saying it like, "Oh, you're so like you're so lucky you're on my show." I don't mean it like that. But what I'm saying is, I reserve this slot one time a month for people that I either love, am wicked curious about, or I love the work that they're doing in the world and I want more people to know about it and I want to shout it out, because I had no idea who you were. I just saw your face pop up on Facebook and I was like, "Who? This is me. What's her story? Who's this chick?" That's me, right? Like, dink. I hit the thing and I'm like, "Whoa." And my nervous system, I call it my spiritual team too. My spiritual team was like, I was so curious about you. And I was like, and on the spot, like normally I'm like, I read all the testimonials, like I do the whole thing. And I was like, I'm in, like, dink. And I was just like, oh my God, because this is how it works. Because somebody smarter than me in this particular area helps me to become more informed. And then I have my group of people and my clients, and then I help them. And like, and it just is like, this is, Ram Dass, the beautiful teacher Ram Dass used to say, we're all just walking each other home.
Yes, and I believe in empowering other people to take what you learn and pass it on. Because that competition is something that gets indoctrinated into us through these systems, and it's premised in scarcity. And that internal sense of lack and not enough, we may have also had in our families of origin, and yet it is so pervasive in our society. And so the language that you're talking right here, Karen, in terms of generativity, sharing it, passing it on, to me, that's how we create social change.
Yes. I mean, I remember being like, so I was born in 68, right? And so I remember distinctly standing in the living room. PBS or somebody was running a special, probably around Martin Luther King Day, whatever it was, but it was civil rights stuff. I remember being like 4 years old, maybe, watching policemen fire hose Black people, right? And like the batons and the beating. And I just remember bawling like in the living room because I didn't understand what I was seeing and it didn't make sense to me. And why are they hurting those people? And like this whole thing. And I think little kids, we come, I think, factory settings with a sense of understanding injustice.
Yes.
So that's that whole, but it's not fair, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And all trauma survivors that I have worked with have a very strong sense of justice. That in spite of what happened, actually maybe because of what happened, there's a stronger sense.
Yes. And I think the more that we continue to do this work, I want to read something like you from your teaching statement,
Yes.
because I think it's, first of all, I fucking love your teaching statement. It inspired me to go like, I want a teaching statement. But this piece, you say, teaching brings me great personal satisfaction. And I also believe that low-cost education is the fastest way to disrupt the colonial patriarchal power over system of dominance and oppression. I believe in pricing that makes classes accessible and affordable. I believe in offering equity scholarships. I believe in acknowledging my teachers and their schools of knowledge. I want to talk about that in a second. I believe that we must disrupt the systems that keep education unavailable, inaccessible, and elitist.
Yes.
This just made me love you even more and more and more. I was like, hope that's not inappropriate, but I was just like, okay, I am picking up what you're putting down, and I just love this. And this thing that you're talking about, take what I'm teaching and share it. And I always say, but give a little credit. It's a big thing that I see in the world right now where people just repeat, copy, whatever. I have great pride in the lineage of, you know, how can I say this? So you say like Vietnamese boat people, right? They were like your culture. I remember you telling this story about how, and please correct me if I say this ignorantly. I don't mean to. But you talked about how usually with Vietnamese people and families, it's like communal. It's like big families. And when your family left, right, there was just like this disconnect. And so when you were having us do in the polyvagal meditation class, you were having us do this thing where we would like come to center and then stretch out and look behind us, like look back to our ancestors. And I was just like crying. I was like, this is so powerful. And I thought to myself, and I'm not trying to make this all about me, but it's like these light bulbs go off in my head because my mother was adopted. And I've always felt like there's a whole line of people. And I always used to say, like, I don't belong anywhere. I don't know where I belong. And my writing teacher said to one of my friends, she's my writing coach, and she said to me, you belong to the truth tellers, you belong to the storytellers, you belong to the, to the scribes, you belong to the ones who have stepped forward, you belong to, and I was just like weeping, like, oh, I do have a lineage. And I'm proud of the lineages that I was fucking lucky enough to learn from. So you bet your ass when I teach and speak, I'll say, Marianne Williamson said, Eknath Easwaran said, Bessel van der Kolk says, Linda Ty says, this one says. I don't feel like I lose any credibility or power or whatever smarty pantsness because I'm quoting my teachers and giving credit where it's due.
Yeah. For me, it's also that aspect of humility.
Yes.
And humility is not thinking less of myself, right? It's thinking of myself less.
Yeah. Okay, wait a minute. Oh, Linda. People always say to me when I'm on their podcast, they're always like, KK, you are like the queen of one-liners. But I don't know, Linda. You got some really good one-liners. Can you please repeat that?
Sure. Humility is not thinking less of myself. It's thinking of myself less. Yeah.
Priscilla and I both approve. We love that one. We love that one so much. So please continue.
Well, it's also to, we live also in a culture of cultural appropriation. We live in a culture of, let me take what's yours and swing it and make it mine. And it's like, no. Right. And when I talk about my teachers, the humility that comes to me is the humility of divinity.
Yes.
Somehow, this grubby little dirt-covered refugee girl,
Yes.
oh, I'm going to get emotional, somehow stumbled across these teachers and these teachings. Right? And somehow is able to share these teachings into the world after I metabolized them and integrated them. Right? It's like, wow. Yeah.
And we are better for it, Linda. Your work is so important because I wrote down, I don't do this for everybody, but I wrote down this list of things that I thought about you as a teacher. And I wrote how you are as a teacher. And I said vibrancy, aliveness. You're so present. You are so aware. You're so transparent. You are deeply vulnerable. You have such incredible integrity. In fact, I remember I missed one of the calls for the polyvagal, for the meditation. But the next week, I don't know what happened. I don't know what was said, but somehow you misspoke or you said something that you thought might have hurt somebody. And you sent out this email apologizing in depth. You took ownership of what you said and how it may have affected or landed. You apologized and you promised to do better. And I just thought, this right here is so important. I wrote down gentle. I wrote down fierce. I remember this work can only be fucking done by people who know how to actually, everybody thinks they're an intuitive teacher and they know how to create safe spaces. No, they don't. No, they don't. I'm not trying to be mean, but it takes the path that you just talked about where you took it in and it became part of you. You didn't just take a weekend course and then start regurgitating it. You allowed it to marinate. You allowed yourself to receive it. So then you also had personal experience and had something to share back about what you've learned. It's not just trying to be the smartest one in the room. It was so important. But you held this container, and I'll never forget, this one girl shared something very vulnerable. And this gentleman kept saying, Linda, can I just say something to so-and-so? Linda, can I just something? And you just kept going, like, without even breaking stride. It was so smooth. You were like, no. Every time he said it, you just go, no. And I thought, yes, I love this fierceness of, I don't know, the protectiveness that you felt about that woman's experience, and not wanting anybody to come in with their whatever. I don't even know what he was going to say, but I just love that fierceness. And then the other thing that I said is that you allowed all experiences and all voices to be included into matter.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, there's still that part of me that holds the wound of trauma in terms of the wound of being invisible. And so as you were sharing all of that, I felt myself becoming a little bit more real. It's like, someone sees me. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I mean, that was part of it. I was like, you're also, not only am I learning about myself in your work and what you're sharing, you're modeling. You're just modeling also. I will be a better spiritual mentor for knowing you and for studying with you and from learning with you. And I feel, even because gentleness, like somebody, David Kessler, he's a friend of mine, and he was, told the story about how his mother died when he was like, I was 12 when my mother was killed. His mother died when he was 13. And somebody once reflected to him, that they believed, just because of the way that he would often deliver information or show up or whatever, that he said, he then now speaks of it like this. He said, I didn't get enough tenderness, enough gentleness as a child. And when he said that, I was like, David, me too. Like, I understood that. But this work with you is helping me to be more gentle towards myself and vicariously others, because I was that kid, because I wasn't allowed to have needs. It'd be like, I'd see somebody, like, again, just in my head, I heard it like this, bitching and moaning about something. It's like, right? It's like, no. So it's just, I just wish everybody in the world had access to you. So could we just at least tell people?
Sure.
Because this probably won't air till May, and I'm purposefully doing it in May, because May is the month of the anniversary of my mother's death, and I want this episode to go out at a time when I think that is important to me, but symbolic of, like, the trauma that so many of us share. But I know that you have 2 10-week things, but I think they're starting in April. So, but can you just tell people maybe some things you have coming up, how they can find you, and then if there's anything else you want to say so you feel complete, I want to invite you to share whatever comes to mind.
Okay. So my website is www.linda-ty.com, and on there you can find out more information about me. You can find out information about the short courses that I've got coming up. The flagship course is the 10-week somatic certificate in embodiment and regulation. There's 3 levels. Level 1 is very heavy on the education. We get to learn about how trauma impacts the body and the nervous system. And we also get to learn about that neurobiological imperative for connection, right? That default setting or that factory setting that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Level 2 is all about skills and resources and tools and toys that we can play with.
Yes.
We can play with.
Yes.
So that we can begin to notice and name what is going on in our nervous system, so that we can then begin to come home to ourselves, 20, 50, 100 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that is the gift of no longer abandoning ourselves in the ways in which we were abandoned. Yeah, I am real. Yeah, my feelings are real. My needs are real. I have a right to take up space in this world as I am, and can I pause and tune in and do what my body needs from me in this moment? Yeah, and then level 3 is the intersection of the nervous system and our attachment systems, and the ways in which we build adaptive strategies to move through the world, and to look at how we can then become curious about those action systems. Yeah. Yeah, and to support ourselves. I think that last class is also about support and nourishment.
Yes.
Yeah, I found that for me in my early days as a therapist, because of my own unpacked stuff around my survival strategies, I was in a rush to empower my clients so that they could hurry up and move on.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it was such a gift to me, all my teachers who gave me the opportunity to sip.
Oh, that was the other thing. I love when you say sip, sip. Can you just talk a tiny bit? Look, I could just keep you on here like for hours, but can you just tell a little bit about sip, sip?
Sure. So for many of us, we have this nourishment barrier because we had a toxic environment. It wasn't okay to take anything in from our environment. And what happens is we then walk through the world like someone who's parched and walking
Yeah.
through the desert, who finally comes across an oasis, and yet the water is painful to take in. It's so painful.
Yes.
So we then either try and gorge on it,
Yes.
right, to make the pain go away really fast, but one is too many and 1,000 is never enough.
Yes. When you said that, and I think in one of the classes, I think you were talking about addiction.
Yes.
Can you say that line one more time?
Sure. One is too many and 1,000 is never enough.
Yes.
Right. And so we're not able to take in goodness. And then when it's there, we try and take it in, but it doesn't land because we're in this frenzy. Yeah. And so sip, sip is taking it in, taking in the compliment.
Oh, I was just going to say, yes. Thank you. You read yes.
Yes. Yeah, taking in the nourishment so that it can land. And it's so painful at the start.
Oh, so uncomfy. So uncomfy.
And yet what happens, right, is it's like Australia, where I was raised, we get drought. Yeah. And then it rains, but the land is so dry that the rain can't saturate the soil, so it then floods. And so what we need to do is we need to the sprinkles, right? We got to water ourselves like we're a delicate little plant. And the soil has been parched, and we're just you water so slowly, and then you watch the soil take it in, and then you water a little bit more. Right? Yeah.
Linda, I love that so much. You guys, I know right now, you're feeling this too. I bet they're going to say to me, can you please bring her back? One of the things that exactly to what you're talking about here that I thought of when I was listening to you teach it in the program, it just dawned on me this thought of we create, I think, these stories of nobody ever got me, nobody loves me, da 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 da. And between you and something Marianne C, my healer friend, said was, you could be in a vat of love, but you can't receive it. And that was the thing that I started to look at and go, were there certain people in my life who didn't give it, or was I just not able to receive it? And it could be both at different times, right? But I was just looking at my role in my own suffering at times.
Yes. Yes. Our nervous system in service of survival is like surveilling. It's like we've got this alarm system, a surveillance system that's checking out our environment. And so we have, as little children, at some point recognized that it's not safe to take in from our caregivers. Yeah. And so we either actively inhibit taking in any goodness from them, or we attach a condition to it. Or maybe our caregivers attach conditions to it for us. You're only good if, you're only allowed to if. And so then we move through the world not knowing how to take things in, right? Or we use it as our superpower. It's too painful to take anything in, and I don't know how to.
That, yes, I don't know how to, I think is the really that key piece there
Yes.
for so many people.
Yeah.
Because even goodness, even the love, even the intimacy, even the gentleness and the compassion, it can feel threatening
Yes.
to a nervous system that's not used to receiving it.
Yes. Yes. And yes, so that threatening is that sympathetic response.
Yes.
And there's also the threatening that happens with the dissociated response. So I have my potato chips, right?
Yeah.
Right? And I have my potato chips, and then what happens is, because I can't take in the goodness, I then dissociate from the goodness because it's too much. And then I eat my potato chips in an auto-hypnoid state, which allows me to then numb out from the pain of the world as well as the goodness of the world. Yeah. So even when I'm taking in good food, yeah, it's like I can only take a few bites before I then vague out or space out.
It's so, but Linda, like, this is so, like, seriously, I am not kidding when I say I wish everybody could learn this stuff, because I think it is, you are doing work that could literally change the world. I think when people have this deeper self-awareness and understanding and curiosity, and we can, like, how many times have we laughed over trauma today? Like, you can laugh about it. Like, so much of my teaching is I have a wicked good sense of humor. I can laugh about shit that I just go like, I know it probably shouldn't be funny, but like, it's like, yeah, because this being human, this fucking being human is like, I always say it's an ongoing problem.
Oh, absolutely. And it's that thing. We're always trying to regulate our nervous systems, and we're always trying to seek connection. I mean, the number of times I've hugged my bag of family-sized potato chips, right?
One time you also said something about eating crunchy foods, eating
Yes.
chips, because what does that do, that crunching down thing? It's satisfying what?
It helps to release tension in the jaw. Yeah.
You guys see how smart, like, look at, here's the thing. There is stuff going on in your body. People, if you're listening, listen to this. There is stuff going on in your body. There is stuff going on in your mind. There's stuff going on in your nervous system where it gets programmed at such a young age. We don't even know that it's happening, that it's a pattern, that we're doing it. But I bet if you ask the people closest to you, the people who witness you and have to live with you and put up with your shit, and you guys know I say that with a lot of love, they might be able to reflect back, right? And this is the beauty of having people, though, let me say this, who can maybe make their report, as I jokingly say, but in a compassionate and loving way. You know, Rabindranath Tagore has this quote that I love where he says, everything that belongs to you, everything that is yours will come to you if you create the capacity to receive it. And I think so much of your work, for me personally, I can't speak for anybody else's experience, is creating the capacity to receive, sip, even more love, even more. I'm already a pretty happy person, but even just more. It was such an honor. It has been such an honor to get to have this conversation with you personally. And I was just like crossing my fingers. I'm like, I know she's wicked busy. I hope she says yes. I hope she says yes. So just thank you so much, Linda. I literally could talk to you all day. And I just want to encourage everybody, if you're listening, to please go to her website, check out her trainings, her offerings. She's been on other podcasts. You can find her on YouTube. You can find her in all kinds of places. And Linda, you are doing, I'm getting emotional again thinking about that image you said, this little dirt covered Vietnamese boat girl, right? And I have my own version of that. I always say that this poor kid, this little kid from Lawrence, Mass, with the dead, murdered mother and the fucked up childhood, I think it's so beautiful that you've taken all of the stuff and you're now using it in service of love and caring and helping other people to help themselves. What a gift.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
I just appreciate you, and I appreciate the generosity of your spirit. And I just want more people to, I mean, I don't even know if you're taking clients. I know you do small group coaching. She might be like, no, I'm full, like whatever. But you guys, you don't need to do anything. I encourage you to follow your curiosity. If you're listening to this and it piques your curiosity or calls to your heart, trust your body's intuition, trust your inner knowing, and go check out the work of my new friend, Linda Tai, because it's something else. It's something else.
Thank you, Karen. May I leave your listeners with a small practice that they can take with
Oh
them?
my God. Yes, I didn't want to, I was like, I don't want to put you on the spot because I taught, remember how you taught in the group this? I taught that to my people.
Yes.
And just so many wonderful tools. But so anyone that you want to choose, please share some practices.
Sure.
I would love that.
Okay. Let's just take a breath. And I invite you to look out the window. Look into the distance. Allow your vision to expand as your eye gaze looks towards the horizon. Look for your exits. Look behind you. Look behind you the other side. Look above you. Look below you. Unhinge your jaw. Bare your teeth. Scrunch your face like a Cabbage Patch Kid. Squeeze your shoulders up and clench your hands, Cabbage Patch Kid face, and release down. Squeeze shoulders up, tension in the hands, squeeze face, push outwards against imaginary side walls. Take up some space in this world. Squeeze up and in, push against the imaginary glass ceiling. Squeeze up and in, and we're going to push forward. Take a moment to wiggle, make any sounds, sighs, hums, singing that your body would like from you.
Oh my God, Linda, you help me to make so much more sense to myself. All these little things that people would say, quirky, weird, whatever. I've realized that I've been trying to regulate my nervous system, doing weird little things that some part of me knew to do. Isn't that amazing?
Yes. Yes. Because what trauma does is it says, don't trust, don't talk, don't feel, don't make sound, don't take up space in this world, don't look around, keep yourself right here and small. And what we did just then is the antithesis of all of that. And state creates story. We've now reshaped the nervous system. Be big, be bold, be you.
And it explains so much. Like as a yoga teacher, and I know you know this too, as a movement person and a yoga person, getting adults, like lion, like getting adults to make sound, they get like, they're like, this shit is too weird. There's so much, and it makes so much sense. Like even you, like when I think about this, I think you've said in the past, like as teachers, we feel compelled to put ourselves out. And I'm actually an introvert who makes herself do extroverted things, right? I'm sure you can relate. But being seen also means, well, especially, I'm like, I could be killed.
Yes. Yes.
So,
exposure equals death.
Yes.
Right. And yet we hold so many gifts, and the world wants our gifts. And the world wants us to metabolize our stories, because metabolism is the process of turning something into fuel for growth.
Yes.
Yes. And we can only metabolize and digest with and through the body. Otherwise, it's spiritual bypass. And it's okay. Yeah. We use the toys and the tools that we have until we accumulate more. Yeah. Yeah.
You guys, you see what I'm talking about. You see what I'm talking about firsthand. I don't have to look. That is just so amazing. And I want to say too that you I want to say this because this is important. Whether it's Linda or somebody else, if you're listening to this and you think like, yes, I want to find a trauma-informed therapist. I want to find a trauma Phoenix Rising therapist, art therapy, movement, dance, whatever it is, moving these things through the nervous system, through the body, EMDR, whatever it is, in a safe way. But that safe container is so important.
Yes.
Finding a place where, because I find so often, it's so interesting, people come to spiritual mentoring and they often are trying so hard to look and appear spiritual that I'm like, look, until you cut the shit, like I can't actually help you. Right. And so once they feel safe, it's like, oh, yes. Oh, like I can just let all parts of me into the room.
Yes. Yes, and this is where I believe in the world of psychotherapy, we've got this bifurcation between the healer and the wounded, right? Where it's not okay as therapists to actually own our stories and talk about ourselves in such a way that suggests that we've got a history, because self-disclosure has been so frowned down upon by the colonizer settler patriarchal dominance of the psychotherapy profession. Right? My sessions are about you, and right, there's that element of allowing the metabolization of my own lived experiences be present in this space.
Those are the only teachers I want and heal. Like those are the people I want to work with, because I know that you understand. You haven't maybe been exactly quote unquote what I've been through, but some part of it shows me that you too, like me too, you understand some of this, and you've done the work and you've come out the other side, and maybe you're still doing the work in different areas, because who isn't, right? And it just, for me, I always find like that, I don't know what the word is, but kind of like this pretending or performing of perfection makes me so fucking anxious. Like if I go to somebody's house and it's so I like clean, don't get me wrong, but if it's so perfect, I get anxious. I'm like, I can't sit, I can't be, I can't whatever. So I think it's one of the other things that I feel like this is like an infomercial for you, I didn't mean to have it be a living testimonial, but seriously, but what you brought to the classes I took with you, I saw that you were somebody who had her own lived experiences, and that it informed you, and that it influenced you, and it inspired you. And in turn, I felt like this is a person who can see me, who will understand. That's one of the things I love. When I saw that you had silly cow, like that you had a stuffy, I was like, oh my God, she gets it. So yes, thank you for saying that, because I think so many people think they have to appear a particular way.
The imposter syndrome gets us really far. It gets us really far. Yeah. And yet we need to have our space where we can start to match that gap or navigate that gap, right, between the mask that we created in order to survive and the part inside of us that yearns for that authenticity and yet is terrified of
Yeah. Because if I show up as my true self, I might get rejected or abandoned or judged or attacked. And if I just show up as this other self, it's not the real me anyways. It's like people who will say they won't give their best, because then if they fail, they can say, well, I didn't try my hardest anyways. So
Yes. Yes. It's that delightful Anais Nin quote.
yes.
Yeah. The pain of staying tightly wound up as a bud became so much that she risked the pain of flowering, or something like that.
Yes. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud became more painful than the risk it took to blossom.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Well, I am so happy that you are blossoming and blossomed in so many ways. And it has been a deep honor and pleasure to get to know you a little better, to spend this time together, and to be one of your students. And I hope to continue getting to mentor. I consider you you're on my spiritual team now. I consider you one of my mentors. And I appreciate, there's this thing I think that I'll just speak for myself, but I'd be curious to hear if you feel this sometimes too, where people say to me, you're so brave to tell your story. You're so courageous. And I would always just kind of, I call it like cock blocking it. I would just like with my Wonder Woman, like ping, 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 like I would never receive that. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? It's not brave. It's just what it was.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's something brave.
Yes.
About coming forward.
Yes.
And you using your voice, and you sharing your work and your wisdom and your knowledge, and you're so fucking smart. Like it is like literally I'm like, oh my God, she is so smart. And I just love, so I wanted to say that to you, and I wanted you to receive it in the way that I really meant it, that I appreciate, your courage and your bravery.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's been a lot of, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
It's been a lot of freaking work.
Yeah. Yes, it has. Yes, it has.
So much work to hold my own story with fierceness and tenderness.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
And you're showing a lot of us how to also do it. And that is, I just wanted to celebrate it. That was part of it. I'm like, I wanted to celebrate you a little bit today, because I always say to my people, I always used to say it as a yoga teacher, and I continue to say it now. I'll always be a yoga teacher, just like you'll always be a yoga teacher, but in that way. But I always say, don't be stingy with your love. Don't be stingy with your breath, I would say, and don't be stingy with your love. And so I always, like, one of the things that was talked about, like how, you can put people up on a pedestal because you're really just celebrating the things that you either want for yourself or whatever. And I'm very clear of what's happening here. I'm just celebrating you because I think you're fucking awesome. And I know the kind of work that went into you being the person and the woman and the teacher that you are. And it's important, I think, that we, especially as women too, that we use our own platforms and we use our time to celebrate each other.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for being you in this world, Karen.
All right, I'm gonna let you go because we've been talking for like 2 hours. I have no idea what's going on. But and I appreciate your time. I appreciate your wisdom. And I'm gonna when this comes out, your bio will be there, all the ways to connect with you, your social media. So don't be surprised if you start finding some people joining your world, because I know they're going to be super fans like I am too.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, so I always close my show by saying just thank you to everybody who took some time to be with us today. I appreciate you. I celebrate you. I see you. I hear you. I feel you. And I love you. Wherever you go, may you leave the people, the place, the animals, the environment better than how you found it. Wherever you go, may you be a blessing. Bye. Hey, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Karen Kenney Show. I super duper appreciate your time, friendship, and support. And look, if something that I shared from my heart today somehow landed in yours, I'd love to hear about it. So please tag me on Facebook or Instagram or IG stories or wherever the cool kids are hanging out these days, and let me know what your favorite part was or what you found most helpful. You can find me over at Karen Kenney Live. That's Karen, KenneYlive. And if you're digging what I'm saying and you want to hear more, I'd be wicked grateful if you could go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, because you guys, that's how you'll help me to keep spreading the love. And if you can think of someone that could benefit from hearing this episode, please share it with them. I'd also love to stay connected with you. So if the feeling is mutual, please go to KarenKenney.com/freebie and download my free guide to building your spiritual team. Until next time, my brothers and sisters, keep living in the fearless flow. Know that I see you, I appreciate you, and I love you. And wherever you go, may you be a blessing.